People thought they had heard every controversial sermon imaginable. Until Brian Carn stood on that stage, looked straight into the crowd, and declared that broke people cannot represent God. In that instant, the entire room froze. Phones came out, clips started circulating online, and within hours the internet erupted. But the reason behind his statement, the real motivation, the hidden context, and the fallout that followed, that's the part no one is talking about, and it's far more explosive than the quote itself. Brian Carn has always been known for preaching with boldness, but this latest statement shook even his most loyal followers. Saying that broke people cannot represent God wasn't just controversial, it sparked outrage, confusion, and endless debates across social media. Some called it harsh, others called it truth. And for those who know the story behind the pulpit, there's a shocking, rarely told side to this moment that most people completely missed. In this video, we'll dive deep into Brian Carn's controversial remarks, explore the context behind his statement, and uncover insider details that no one has reported before. You'll hear about the events leading up to this sermon, the reactions from both the congregation and the wider faith community, and why this statement might reveal a much bigger truth about how he views ministry, wealth, and influence in the church. You won't believe what happened next, because the aftermath went far beyond viral clips and heated comments. And this is where it gets unbelievable. What he really meant and how it affected his ministry and reputation is something very few people expected. By the end of this video, you'll have the full story, the context, and the truth that most people missed. Before Brian Carn became known for his controversial remarks, he was building a reputation as one of the most influential voices in modern ministry. Many remember him from his days as a young, ambitious preacher, traveling across cities with sermons that drew both awe and controversy. He was magnetic, passionate, and fearless, a preacher who didn't shy away from calling out what he believed was the uncomfortable truth. But his rise wasn't overnight. It was a journey marked by relentless dedication, personal struggles, and the kind of sacrifices few outside the ministry could truly understand. He started with small congregations, long nights of preparation, and a vision that went far beyond conventional preaching. People say that even in those early days, he had a message that made listeners uncomfortable, forcing them to confront their own complacency. It was during these years that Carn developed his philosophy that ministry, influence, and faith are deeply intertwined with personal responsibility, ambition, and yes, even financial stewardship. According to insiders, he believed early on that spiritual authority and worldly preparation go hand in hand, and that those who don't take their personal growth seriously may struggle to represent God effectively. By the time he became a household name in gospel and charismatic circles, Brian Carn had already cultivated a reputation for delivering sermons that sparked debate. While some admired his honesty and directness, others felt his approach was too blunt, even divisive. And it was this reputation that made his "broke people cannot represent God" sermon hit like a lightning bolt. But what most people don't realize is that this statement wasn't made in isolation. It was the culmination of decades of experiences, frustrations, and observations he had witnessed in both his personal and ministry life. It's a context that few reports ever mention, a context that will change the way you interpret his words entirely. And yet, even as he built influence and drew attention, there were critics watching closely. Some questioned his wealth, his decisions, and even his intentions. Others wondered if his statements were a form of accountability or a reflection of deeper personal beliefs. But what happened next, during the sermon that shocked the world, was a moment that pushed reactions to a level few could have anticipated. The controversy that followed didn't just challenge his public image, it forced Carn to explain, defend, and sometimes clarify what he really meant. And the reasoning behind that statement, the motivation that few understood, is where the real story begins. The day Brian Carn delivered the sermon that would make headlines was like any other Sunday service on the surface. His congregation filled the pews, cameras were rolling, and the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. But what happened when he spoke those words changed everything. Broke people cannot represent God, Carn declared, his voice steady, confident, and unflinching. The room went silent. People blinked. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Phones were raised, recording every moment, and as soon as the words left his mouth, murmurs began spreading throughout the congregation. To outsiders, the statement may have sounded harsh or even shocking. To supporters, it rang with truth, a call for spiritual and personal responsibility. And to those who knew the context behind his ministry, it was a culmination of a philosophy Carn had developed over decades, that God's representatives must embody discipline, vision, and stewardship, not just of faith, but of life, resources, and opportunity. But what prompted this particular sermon? Sources close to Carn reveal that it was sparked by repeated frustrations he witnessed in ministries across the country. He had seen leaders struggling financially, congregations stagnating, and spiritual messages being undermined by a lack of personal accountability. According to insiders, Carn felt that without financial and personal discipline, even the most devoted individual would face limits in truly fulfilling their divine purpose. As soon as the sermon clips circulated online, reactions were explosive. Social media platforms erupted with debate. Hashtags began trending. Comment sections were flooded with a mix of outrage, support, and confusion. Some accused him of being materialistic. Others defended his perspective as bold, honest, and necessary. Even pastors and faith leaders chimed in, some applauding his candor, others criticizing his approach as divisive. Within hours, news outlets picked up the story, dissecting every angle of the sermon. Videos were shared millions of times, interviews were scheduled, and Carn found himself at the center of a storm that he hadn't anticipated would reach such a fever pitch. But the truth is, the controversy wasn't just about the words themselves, it was about the deeper message he was trying to convey, the part that most people didn't immediately see. He wasn't simply condemning poverty or criticizing those struggling financially. He was challenging individuals to consider their role, their preparation, and their ability to step into positions of spiritual authority responsibly. And yet, the backlash forced him to clarify his stance publicly. He explained that his statement was about empowerment, growth, and preparation. But even with that clarification, tensions didn't ease. Conversations about wealth, ministry, and representation of God intensified in the public sphere. Critics dug deeper, supporters became more vocal, and the debate entered a space where spirituality, social perception, and personal success collided. But here's where it gets even more unbelievable. Insiders say that this sermon was only the beginning. Behind the scenes, there were private discussions, confrontations with other ministry leaders, and personal reflections that Brian Carn had never shared publicly until now. And what happened next would completely redefine how the faith community saw him, his ministry, and the message he was trying to deliver. The day after Brian Carn's sermon, the storm hit full force. Clips from the service were shared across social media platforms, going viral within hours. Comments poured in from every corner of the internet. Supporters praised him for speaking uncomfortable truths, claiming that his message encouraged spiritual discipline and personal growth. Critics, however, accused him of elitism, materialism, and even insensitivity toward those struggling financially. News outlets began covering the story, with headlines designed to provoke clicks and engagement. Some framed it as a shocking condemnation of the poor. Others highlighted the debate it sparked within the faith community about what it truly means to represent God. Meanwhile, talk shows and podcasts dissected every word, questioning whether Carn's approach was divisive or necessary. But what most people didn't see was what happened behind the scenes. Sources close to Carn say that he faced immense pressure from multiple sides. Other pastors and ministry leaders reached out privately, some expressing support, others cautioning him about the potential backlash. Church members sent messages of concern and encouragement, many admitting that while they were shocked, they appreciated the honesty of his message. On a personal level, Carn himself was dealing with a storm of emotions. Despite being a public figure used to scrutiny, this controversy struck deeper than usual. He reflected on years of ministry, the responsibilities of leadership, and the tension between spiritual truth and public perception. It wasn't just about defending a statement. It was about ensuring that his ministry remained authentic while navigating the delicate balance between inspiration and offense. Interestingly, insiders reveal that this moment forced Carn into a period of deep personal reflection. He revisited past experiences, recalling times when he had witnessed well-meaning individuals struggle to lead because of a lack of preparation, both spiritually and practically. He thought about the people he had mentored, the lives he had touched, and the communities he had served. And in that reflection, he realized that his statement was not an attack. It was a call to action, a challenge to step up, take responsibility, and embrace growth in all areas of life. But here's the twist most reports missed. The controversy didn't end at online debates or news headlines. It triggered private conversations that would reshape his ministry strategy, his messaging, and even his public persona. According to sources, Carn began planning a series of sermons, workshops, and interviews designed to clarify his philosophy, explain the context of his statement, and guide people towards spiritual empowerment without misunderstanding. Even so, the backlash continued. Social media was relentless. Memes, hot takes, and heated discussions flooded every platform. The situation tested his resilience, his faith, and his ability to communicate effectively under scrutiny. For many, this would have been overwhelming. For Carn, it became a defining moment, a chance to demonstrate that controversy doesn't have to destroy credibility. It can redefine it. And just when it seemed like the storm might settle, an unexpected development occurred that took the situation to a whole new level. Insider reports say that a high-profile debate involving other influential pastors and faith leaders was arranged to publicly address the statement. This wasn't just about defending words anymore. It was a pivotal moment that would determine how Carn's message would be interpreted and remembered. But what happened during that debate changed everything. And it's the part that very few people have seen or discussed publicly. Following the viral sermon and the initial wave of online reactions, Brian Carn found himself invited to a high-profile debate with several influential pastors and faith leaders. The event was streamed live and drew massive attention from across the globe. What was meant to be a discussion quickly turned into a defining moment in his ministry, one that would determine how both supporters and critics perceived his controversial statement. From the outset, the tension in the room was palpable. Cameras were rolling, the audience was buzzing, and social media feeds were flooded with live updates. As Carn approached the stage, he carried himself with the calm confidence of someone who had faced scrutiny before, but was now prepared to defend not just his words, but the philosophy behind them. During the debate, questions came fast and fierce. Other pastors asked pointedly, wasn't the statement offensive to those struggling financially? Did it risk alienating believers who genuinely felt called to ministry but lacked resources? Was Carn suggesting that material wealth is necessary to serve God effectively? Carn responded with the precision of someone deeply familiar with both Scripture and the practical realities of leadership. He explained that his statement was not about condemning poverty or belittling the poor. Instead, he emphasized that his words were a call for preparation, responsibility, and personal growth. He cited examples of ministry leaders who had struggled due to lack of planning or resources, showing how their potential was often limited not by faith, but by readiness. The reactions in the room were mixed. Some nodded in agreement, recognizing the practical wisdom behind his approach. Others remained skeptical, visibly uncomfortable with the blunt phrasing. The debate quickly became a platform for deeper conversations about accountability, spiritual authority, and the balance between faith and action. Social media erupted once again. Clips from the debate were shared millions of times. Faith-based forums debated Carn's points in long threads. Commentators analyzed every nuance, from his tone to his choice of examples. Many supporters argued that he had courageously spoken a necessary truth, while detractors accused him of promoting elitism under the guise of spiritual guidance. Yet, beyond the heated exchanges, something remarkable happened. People began to look beyond the soundbite. Interviews, podcasts, and articles explored the context behind his words, revealing a philosophy that extended far beyond money or status. Carn's central argument was about readiness, emotional, spiritual, and practical readiness to represent God in any leadership role. Insiders reveal that this debate also had a personal impact on Carn. Facing such intense scrutiny forced him to refine his message, clarify his intentions, and strengthen the core principles that guided his ministry. According to sources, he spent hours afterward reflecting, journaling, and planning new ways to communicate these ideas without diluting their impact. And just when the debate seemed to settle, an unexpected development occurred. A prominent faith influencer publicly challenged Carn's message, sparking a new round of discussion that reignited the controversy and brought the conversation to an even larger audience. This wasn't just about one sermon anymore. It had become a nationwide dialogue about leadership, faith, and the qualities needed to truly represent God. What most people don't see is the moments that happen behind closed doors, the private conversations, the mentorship sessions, and the deep reflections that shape a leader's worldview. After the viral sermon and the public debate, Brian Carn invited several emerging pastors and ministry leaders into a private session. What was said there provides insight into why he made the statement about broke people not being able to represent God and why it resonated so strongly with some while shocking others. In that room, Carn spoke candidly. He revealed personal experiences from his early ministry, describing times when he had encountered passionate, devoted individuals whose spiritual calling was undeniable, but whose lack of preparation or resources hindered their effectiveness. He shared stories of ministries that had failed not because of faith or commitment, but because leadership and vision were not accompanied by planning, financial responsibility, and personal discipline. One emerging pastor asked, "But doesn't that feel harsh? Isn't God's grace supposed to cover our limitations?" Carn responded firmly but thoughtfully. He explained that grace is indeed abundant, but representing God publicly requires more than passion. It requires readiness. Faith without works, preparation without action, they leave a gap, he said. And when you step into leadership unprepared, you risk failure, disappointment, and even harm to the people you're called to serve. He went further, challenging these young leaders to consider not just their spiritual lives, but the practical dimensions of ministry, managing resources, guiding congregations responsibly, building sustainable programs, and maintaining personal integrity in both wealth and action. His philosophy is clear. God calls people to lead, but leadership is not just spiritual, it is holistic. Success in representing God involves emotional, financial, and intellectual readiness. Sources close to Carn say that during this session, he shared one of the most revealing insights about his controversial statement. It was never about wealth itself, but about accountability and preparation. He explained that too often, spiritual leaders with limited resources become overwhelmed, leaving communities underserved or ministries struggling. Carn's bold words were a wake-up call, a challenge to elevate the standard of leadership in the church. The room fell silent as he spoke. Many of the emerging pastors later admitted that while they initially bristled at the phrasing, they recognized the truth in the underlying message. It wasn't condemnation, it was mentorship. It was tough love. And it was a philosophy shaped by decades of experience, victories, failures, and the high stakes of spiritual leadership. Outside the walls of that room, the controversy raged on. Social media, news outlets, and faith forums debated Carn's statements with fervor. But what was happening behind the scenes, this exchange of wisdom, reflection, and guidance, painted a more nuanced picture of his intentions. The public narrative focused on shock and outrage, while the private narrative highlighted growth, accountability, and preparation. And yet, despite the mentorship and clarification, Carn's statements continued to ripple through the broader community, sparking more discussions about the qualities necessary to truly represent God. Many began asking uncomfortable questions. Is passion enough to lead a ministry? Should spiritual leaders also cultivate personal discipline, financial stability, and strategic vision? How do faith and practical responsibility intersect in today's world? These are the questions Carn wanted people to grapple with. And while the viral clip sparked outrage, the deeper conversation he hoped to ignite was far more transformative than anyone realized.